So, welcome to another episode of the Expert Series. And today we're talking to Ankit Jadav, who joins us, who works at Portmeirion Group. And we'll be discussing tips and best practices to do with managing Adobe Commerce. Ankit, could you just start by just giving us just a quick background about yourself and your role?
Yes, of course. So a bit of a background about myself. I've been working in e-com for the last 10 years. And out of that, 8 years have pretty much been with Magento 1 and Magento 2. I've worked in sort of various sides of e-commerce, so starting from sort of admin side of things. I've worked with third parties such as your eBays and Amazons, your FBAs, and I've worked as a sort of in-house developer as well. And now I work as a digital operations manager. So now I'm focused on the strategic business project because business is going through a bit of transformation right now. It will be over the next 5 years. So it's quite exciting. So I'm still sort of the boots on the ground, getting involved in technical integrations, scoping, and execution, and finally delivery.
Fantastic. And I think what's really interesting today is with your experience is you've actually worked 2 years in agency side as well. Yeah, so yeah, fantastic. I think that will bring a different point of view. So yeah, great. Ankit, from the research that we did, several retailers shared their frustrations with random site or logic sort of breakdowns, and the annoyance of these bugs, sort of impacting them. Basically complaints in regards to Magento platform in general. Can you sort of share any light on this frustration?
So random bugs within Magento with any platform really, they're sort of expected, but it all sort of comes down to how neat the code has been written and the stringentness of the QA process. Because if all of that has been followed correctly, then you should have a less buggy platform. However, when it comes to any integration, any code executions, there is always a chance of something going wrong. So you can do as much due diligence as possible, but if you're backing it up with the correct QA process, then you should be in a good place.
Right, and I think we'll come back onto best practices around writing the code a little later on. Where online retailers had previously created bespoke code to develop new functionality that maybe at the time several years ago Adobe or Magento weren't delivering. Since then, Adobe's released new code, and sometimes this has caused like a conflict with functionality breaks. Just wanted to get your sort of like insights into native versus bespoke code best practices.
So best practice, my general advice is stick to Magento native as much as possible, because just like you mentioned, if you're developing custom bespoke code outside of the platform, when it comes to new upgrades, whether that be code level upgrade, database level upgrade, you would have to sort of go back and inspect that custom code again and see and effectively retrofit it with the new platform. So whenever it comes to any functionality, you should be working well as yourself. If you know the platform, then just understand how the platform works fully and whether the functionality that the business is requesting exists within Magento or not. If it does, use that. If it doesn't, and then when it comes to using custom coding as well, try not going too far away from what Magento is supporting. So tweak the logic, but only as much as you need. Don't go fully custom then because when it comes to then upgrading to your future versions, it will become a pain to get past that point.
So when would you look to create custom code? Or like what's an example?
So a custom code example would be something like building building like a store locator. That might be a custom code example, because that's the Magento does support Google Maps. Maps if you add API key in, but you can't build a store locator out of it. So then that becomes a sort of scenario of, do you write it fully custom, or do you go looking for an extension that does the job for you? Now 9 times out of the 10, the extensions that are out in marketplace, they do the job, because let's face it, store locators, they are pretty simple. You find information, you just want to get to the store. But if the business has a specific needs, then you can effectively buy one of those extensions as close to your need as possible, and then get the developers to tweak it so it matches your needs. So when it comes to future upgrades, piece that has been custom coded versus what is actually available on the extension itself.
Right. So I think based on what you're saying, if you are considering like a feature gap and whether or not to create bespoke code, you should first check to make sure Adobe doesn't do it or
First check with, yeah, so first check Adobe, see if it's actually supplied within the Adobe native functionality. If it's not, then instead of going full custom code, look at the number of extensions that are available out there as well, because the marketplace is full of them. Just by finding the one that's meeting your need, you can add the extension on. And even at that point, you feel like you need to tweak that functionality, then tweak that extension instead of going to your tech partner and writing a fully custom built solution, because you will save yourself money and time.
no, that's fantastic. I don't think anyone's sort of mentioned that as yet to tweak the functionality of the extension. Um, yeah, great. Um, more than half of the UK retailers that we spoke to talked and sort of shared that the cost of maintenance and upgrades was higher than expected. In one case, a luxury brand went over by £500,000 on their replatforming budget. But in general, cost seems to be running over the budget or what they thought it was going to cost. Do you have any kind of tips or advice in regards to working with the development teams on how to keep on budget?
So first things first, when it comes to any replatform, is going through that scoping exercise. So whenever you're platforming, just look at the scope, just understand exactly what will be delivered. So what's part of the project and what's not included in there, because a lot of the times, I think whenever it comes to agencies selling you proposals, they tend to go yes to everything. But until you actually get down to the details of it and understand specification, you won't know what you're getting and what you're not getting. So that's the first thing. That way you got a fixed cost, so you know I'm paying this amount for this functionality. Anything outside of that specification will be different, and that will change request. Second thing, your tech partner, make sure they are on board with your business, so they understand the platform as well as they can, so they can advise the functionalities that you do need, which is in the platform versus what isn't. Third one, whenever you're talking about replatforming, you will have a design element as well. So you will have your design agency. They will have to be involved. So you will have to work closely with them and your tech partner, so you can have a feasibility of what the design agency is producing. Tech partner will be actually build that within the platform's constraints. Another one, that the other layer that comes on top is integration side of integration side. So if you do have a ERP that you're integrating with which a lot of retailers do now, any PIM systems, make sure those integration points are available, because if they're not, if you don't go through this in a scoping exercise, the replatforming project is not worth it, because you need the full integration to come with the actual platform itself. And the final one is working with the SEO agency. But when it comes to replatforming, you might be looking at SEO implications. Example might be your current website might have .html at the end of the PDPs, but the new websites, they might not have the .html. Well, how is that going to work? How is that going to impact SEO strategy? What are they going to do to mitigate it? So you need the full 360 view from all different partners involved and yourself as a business to understand how that's going to impact you cost-wise, so you can get as much visibility into the cost as possible, and the business is fully aligned as to what you'll be delivering at the end of that project. Because a lot of the times it comes to managing expectations, because people tend to think they will get everything for this price, but then they miss out X, Y, and Z.
No, it's a very great answer. And I think with a replatforming project, it's such a huge undertaking, and like we said, this costs an extra £500,000. So one point that kept coming up was how team members would leave. So the people that were responsible for code years ago left, and there was a knowledge gap between where the company is now and where they were. And I think that's what you touched on, is like maybe how can a company that knowledge of the platform, the passing that knowledge down. Any tip?
Documentation. Whenever delivering, we've just been through that now. We delivered the redesign project. Now I've finished the documentation. So if the content person isn't in and somebody else needs to make a content change or a specific attribute change on the website, they can go into this documentation, and I've highlighted everything that's built custom, so that's outside of Magento, that they know they can edit themselves. go to the documentation, read it, right, screenshots, videos, everything. So it becomes a business continuity, because you don't, like you say, if the person that's knows Magento inside out leaves the business, all of a sudden you've got the knowledge gap, and then business doesn't know what it did, how to move forward, then the cost, the time, and everything else just adds on. Whereas if you've got continuity plan, then you just carry on as normal.
Would you be able to just sort of lay out that process of the documentation in just a little bit more or detail what you just described? I mean, so
Yes.
yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so documentation wise, is again is being close to your sort of tech partner and understand the platform. So when you're going through the re-platform project, get stuck in it from day one. Don't wait until I will wait for X feature to be built or Y feature to be available. As soon as the platform is available to you, start playing around with it. Start understanding what it does, what it doesn't do. Start looking at the front end from the changes you're making, just so you got understanding of, right, these are these strings, these are the levers that I will have available to me, versus this not being available. Then that comes to sort of taking it down to internally as well. So platform wise, you can go to your commercial team and go, right, well, this platform is doing X, Y, and Z out of the box. Is that feasible for you? Does it do everything that you guys need? Yes, no, that becomes that exercise, right? It doesn't do it, we need to get X, Y, and Z built. Your SEO guys, platform is doing X, Y, and Z. Is that feasible for you? No, it needs X, Y, and Z. So then you're collating all the knowledge. You've got the change that needs to be made, and that's the change that needs to go into this documentation. So as every feature is being built, you're documenting it, what it does, how to do it, how it will affect the front end. So when you're passing the knowledge on, others know exactly how to execute.
Okay, yeah, I think this topic in itself would be really useful, because it's a problem that we heard from the research a lot, where the custom code was unknown. Yeah, and so there was a lot of unpicking of what was that? Okay, no, great.
Well, that's both internally and externally as well. So internally, yeah, if somebody leaves, but say if you've probably seen a couple of these scenarios as well. If the project is not going in the right direction, halfway through, some people may end up changing the agency altogether, or your tech partner, your internal developers, whatever have you. At that point, it then becomes the new developer, new agency, them having to understand the code, see exactly what it's doing before they could take that project on as well. Whereas if you have something like this in place, having internal knowledge as well, you can hand that documentation over to them and go, right, we believe it's up to this far. So that way they've got a good starting point, and then they can do their code audits to understand, well, you're saying it this far, but they have done extra this piece on top as well. So you're giving them a quick heads up, again, becoming time and money saving exercise as well. Because if you are in such a situation, then you want to expedite and deliver that project as quickly as possible.
No, great. And yeah, talking about sort of timelines and planning, some e-commerce leaders were satisfied with the agency partners. Others pretty much had no trust at all. And when the agency partner would come to them and say, it's going to take 2 months, they would automatically add on, like a month or two. Yeah, just what are your sort of thoughts around this topic in regards to timelines and getting and being able to get accurate timeframes from your development team?
So the accurate timeframe piece, it's to sort of take that back as well. That's, to me, that's a two-sided, because to get an accurate timeline, you need to give them with the accurate specification. If you're going to go with just a one line, I want to change this, then that's not good enough, because if the tighter specification that you're able to deliver, the more realistic timeline you would get back. Because if you go back to them with the one line, you will get an excellent quote. Oh yeah, this will be done in 10 hours. But then as soon as you get into the details of it, oh, we didn't consider this. Oh, we didn't know that. So it's about the specification. And even at that point, it's a collaboration between yourself and the tech partner, because you're giving them as much specification as possible. If the tech partner, they have a good developer, they will go through that specification and ask all the relevant questions, because normally the teams that work on a project, they tend to sort of do a BAU one as well. So they will look at the specification and ask the questions, well, we can do this, but it will impact this. Have we thought of this? Have we thought of that? So you're doing that work upfront.
And that touches back on what you were saying before about the documentation and knowing what you have. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay. No, that's fantastic. Okay. So just moving on. Some retailers said that their development team may technically deliver what they asked for, but it didn't keep to UX standards. I think one quote was, "I wish that they would take more pride in their work." How do you manage as part of the development process to make sure UX is taken into consideration as well?
So we are a bit fortunate in this aspect because our tech partner has a UX specialist as well. So whenever we are briefing any sort of UX changes in, we tend to speak to them as well and just get their input as to what they are seeing. Because while as an e-com, you look at one feature that works for your site and you can brief it in a certain way, they would have that greater exposure, so they can advise, this change that you're requesting is great, but the impact you're seeing is negative, positive, whatever it may be. So you're getting their thoughts as well. Because again, when you work in e-com, you become solely focused on your side and your side only. You don't tend to sort of step out. So having your tech partner and the UX specialist involved is a great one to start with.
It's just sort of maintaining the UX standards as part of development. I think, but is there any sort of brand standards or the way that the development has to always be done, like page speed times or the UX style? Yeah.
Well, so for the page speed times, that's sort of a given at this point, because whenever you're working, that's your sort of primary metric. Because if your page speed isn't correct, you get penalized from all over the place. So that's your first one. For the sort of the style guides and such. So whenever hopefully a lot of businesses do have their web style guides in place as well. So when the developers are creating those new elements, they're keeping them in mind, and your web style guides are being updated as well. So internally, this element needs to look like this, look like that. So God forbid, if you do move to a different agency, you can hand over the style guide to them as well. So their front-end developer knows what they're working towards.
So that's all part of your documentation, is that web style guide. Is that right?
Yes, indeed. Web style guide, documentation, anything to do around the website, even if it includes sort of patch or guidelines. So how the assets need to be looking, how they need to be shot, all the information. If your tech partner is a full service agency, they will really appreciate that, because then they can advise, going, well, yeah, guys, you're shooting it this way, but have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? It becomes a collaboration.
Another challenge that kept getting raised was that the development teams were more reactive than proactive. One retailer, one e-commerce leader said, "We're still in the stage of bug fixes. I think we can definitely get to a point where we're being more proactive, but we definitely feel we're in that reactive space right now." Where do you sort of feel, and what's been your experience in regards to getting the dev team on proactive projects?
So in terms of being reactive, that in a way sort of goes back to how the platform has been maintained. Because if the tech partner that you're working with and sort of everyone that operates that platform, if that's been done in a certain way, so minimum custom codes, taking the native functionality, all that good stuff, then the number of bugs that you will have, you will reduce them as well. Now, again, when it comes to bugs, what are we talking about? We're talking about P1 bugs, P2, P3s. What is it exactly that's stopping? So all of that needs to be prioritized, because you can have 10 bugs, but if all of them are P2s and P3s, well, then is that a blocker? Is that something you need to fix now, or can you live without? So if you get stuck in this mindset, then you'll always be in this fixing mode, because your bugs will always keep coming up. So you will stop yourself from sort of planning that or being proactive moving forward. So if there are bugs, then you need to work with the tech team and go, right, well, we've got bugs and we've got BAU as well. So we suggest we spend X amount of time fixing these bugs, but at the same time, we need to deliver these key business initiatives as well.
And I think everything seems to be coming back to what you said about product ownership, documentation, and the specification.
And collaboration is the key point, because if you don't collaborate with your tech partner, so like one of the things that we do is going past the sort of business strategy, we go to our tech partner and tell them what we are going to, what we're looking to deliver for next year. So they've got a rough idea of the tech wise, we will be probably making change here, probably making a change here, and then they can come up with the tools as well, saying, guys, we understand you're trying to deliver this. Have a look at this set of tools, have a look at that set of tool as well. It's a collaboration. Instead of you just being this one way, do this, deliver, right, we go and take it away. It becomes a two-way conversation. So going down the line, if you do have a certain feature that needs to be prioritized, you can go back to them and go, guys, I need this prioritized because of X, Y, and Z. They will understand it because that two-way communication.
Yeah, just touching on that two-way communication. Something else that came out in the research was, the development team understanding about the commercials behind it. What are your thoughts on that?
So that forms part of the collaboration, because development team normally, and to find developers that understand sort of commercial impact as well, they're like the golden eggs. I'll work with some brilliant, others not so much. They tend to just focus on their craft and their craft only. The more you are talking to, I don't speak to the developers, but I talk to the account directors, and I know the information is being fed down because of the output that I see. So the more you're keeping your tech partner or whoever your key contact is at that point, whether that be through your monthly reviews, weekly calls, stand-ups, whatever it is, the more information you're feeding them, the more they are and more they can pass down on to that developer. Now, am I expecting developers to be commercially aware? Not fully, because that would be too much to ask. It's almost like asking the commercial team to be aware of the type of code that's been written. You wouldn't expect them to do that, but you wouldn't expect them to have a general understanding of the direction that they're heading into.
It just helps just with their motivation or where they prioritize and how much time to spend in the back of their mind. Is that where you see it sort of affecting things, like when they know the commercials?
Yes, yeah, they definitely, because that then it's got a sense of urgency as well. So then when you're prioritizing, you can say, well, I need this, and they can understand why. And it's not just a list, it's a list that has a methodical approach to it.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. No, it's really interesting what you're talking about with the documentation and the specification to the developers. Yeah, I might talk to you offline about that if there's an example of documentation that could be shared. I think that could be really useful. Definitely useful. We haven't actually talked about probably the biggest challenge that I kept hearing from talking to the retailers, and that was the upgrade path from Adobe. Some people are sitting back a couple of levels because of concerns, but generally it was a big problem. Just wanted to get your thoughts on how to manage upgrades. Not always the sort of major upgrades, but the incremental upgrades from Adobe.
So managing upgrades wise, if it is a major upgrade, then you need to scope it out with the developers. But when there is an incremental upgrade, I tend to, again, this is just my personal, but people in different businesses approach it a different way, tend to stay one version back, because whenever there's the latest version being released, and it's in all fairness to Adobe and the Adobe community, they go through as much QA as possible, but there's always something that doesn't work. And if you become one of those early adopters, I've seen it where you see a lot of pain points because you've adopted into that way too early, and all those bugs that you're seeing that haven't been ironed out, and there's quick fixes and etc. etc. Generally stay one version behind. Now, if there is a patch, so you got the version upgrade, but then you got security patches as well, which Adobe is releasing, and I would really encourage all the e-com leaders or anyone that works within Adobe space to subscribe to their notifications as well. So they send security notifications. So if there is a patch being released for the Adobe Commerce or anything within Adobe Suite, you get an email. This is what it is. You can go and have a read of it. Does it apply to my version? Pass it to your tech partner. Make sure they understand it. 9 out of 10, your tech partner will be a step ahead of you because they will be more involved in the Adobe space. And yeah, security patches, always get them done first. Versions, stay one version back, and then go for it, and then get that upgraded.
Yeah, great. And on that topic of upgrades is and the decision to upgrade or not is based on what features are going to be coming out that are relevant to their business. I was just wondering, do you have any method, or how do you go about knowing which features are going to be good for your business?
So I have a pretty good relationship with the Adobe account manager. So we have a call every quarter just to understand what's on Adobe's roadmap. And that gives me an idea of if I need to be looking at doing a full version upgrade, how critical is that that next release that they're working on, and whether that's something that we'll be able to utilize as a business. Because if we are not going to use those latest Adobe features, then is it worth spending that time and effort upgrading it, or are we worth just keeping our platform optimized? That's another decision that needs to be featured into when you're looking at upgrading your platform as well.
Right, and I think we mentioned from a previous conversation that the GitHub, is that right?
Yes.
For you can check there to see if there's problems with the upgrade.
Yes,
as
indeed.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, fantastic. In your current role, I'm not sure what role does data play for you? You know,
It's a massive. I mean, I'm not involved in the commercial side of things, but we are obviously getting involved in the integration of tools, and data is massive because to us, data takes out the whole sort of ambiguity around I think. Instead of the I thinks, you can look at the core data and go, right, customers are transacting with this instead of this, right? We need to push more on this, and you're able to make those decisions, even when it comes to your UX changes, with core data behind it. So if you have a certain recording tool, then you can see where the customers are being stuck. You can raise that. Well, this is a blocker for the customer. That's a UX blocker, right? To make that change. This is, whether, and then it gives you a chance to justify things as well. Because if you have a certain page layout that the business is used to, and all of a sudden you want to make a change to the layout, if you have that tool available that says people are clicking on X block compared to Y block, well, I want to make that change and see how that works. So it gives you a lot more flexibility and freedom with data behind you.
and you're in the unique position that you're working on multiple brands, right?
Yes, indeed. We've got 6 brands.
Six brands.
So then data again, data plays a huge part because different brands have different customer personas browsing them. So what works for brand X wouldn't work for brand Y. What works for brand Y doesn't work for brand. So then you're constantly just looking to optimize that user journey to where we need to make a change for users to transact to the website, browse website, whatever it is that users are doing, they're within our journeys. They're able to do that frictionless.
And so you're the company that you work with to do the development. They have a different brand guide for each one.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Yes, yep.
Okay.
They're all separate brand guidelines. Again, documentation wise as well. All of that we have. So when it comes to internally as well, developing elements or you're creating wireframes about what certain campaign needs to look like, certain upcoming campaign needs to look like, they're keeping those brand guidelines in mind. So they know the components, what colors they can use, what fonts they can use. So no one is going outside of the brand.
Yeah, okay. No, fantastic. And I was just going to say, when a project does start to run off the rails in terms of timeline or budget, do you have any sort of strategies around that? I mean, just to sort of get it back on track with the development team.
So if the project is going over timeline, find out exactly why it's going over the timeline first, whether it was some development in scoping, and you can do this part as a part of wash up in the scoping, whether it's the development taking long, whatever it is. The next part after that is if the project is over timeline, that needs to be communicated back to the business with the stakeholders, so they understand there is something that's going wrong here. The piece after that is, if you're going over, we are not going to deliver the 100% of what we promised. So let's look at the features that we were working on and decide, right, as an MVP, we're going to deliver X, Y, and Z, and then we will take the other features as part of our phase 2. So you're doing an incremental, your agile delivery instead of trying to deliver everything in one go, being delayed, over budget. That's not going to look good when you go report back to the business. So you can approach that strategy as well. And just another one to add on top as well. If you're working with, if you have a good relationship with your tech partner, they'll work with you. If it's going over budget, sometimes they'll eat some, but they might be the hours wise or the budgets wise. They'll work with you and go, right, we really like this, right? Given that we are going up over, but we will give you X amount of flex, so you can work with that, again, collaboration piece. So you're not taking it all of it on your own.
Yeah, great. So if you've got the right documentation in the first place of what you actually own, your product, and then you give the right specifications and then the right collaboration with the team. But then of course things still go wrong from time to time. And then it's the communication.
It's always that key thing. You plan to fail, don't fail to plan.
No, it's fantastic. And No, I think that's everything, Ankit. That's been really helpful. And yeah, it would be great to talk more in regards to the documentation and specifications with you later, and maybe just something that we can share with others. But thank you so much for joining us today, for joining us on the Expo series.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much.
All right.